So again, for those of you who do not know, this class is on video formatting, specifically for delivery to NECAT. So when you submit a video to us, we want to make sure that you are submitting a video that looks the best for you and looks the best for us. And so one of the big issues that we've had is the problem with aspect ratio. So aspect ratio in basic terms. So there's two kind of basic aspect ratios that we're going to be working with. And these are two aspect ratios that are kind of universal for video everywhere. So the two aspect ratio sizes are 16:9 and 4:3. So 16:9 is, another name for 16:9 is widescreen. So if you ever see a video that's in widescreen video format, it's probably going to be 16:9, and the aspect ratio is 16:9. And the other one that we're going to be talking about today is 4:3. And so it's displayed just like it's shown here with the 16:9 and the 4:3, right? And so those are the two aspect ratios that we're going to be talking about today. So what does this mean? Where do we get 4:3? Where do we get 16:9? So if you look at these two diagrams, we had first the 16:9 is one on the left, and it means that we have 16 units across, so 16 units horizontally, and then 9 units vertically. So it's 16 across, 9 vertical. Same thing with 4:3, 4 across and 3 vertically. So that's essentially what we're looking at when we say 16:9 and 4:3. The sizes of the blocks are irrelevant. So when you see these sizes of blocks, you see, well, the 16:9 are smaller and the 4:3 are bigger. That really doesn't matter. It's essentially just a ratio of two, a left and a right and up and down. So basically just determining the difference in the size between the left and right and the top and bottom. All right? So it could be 16:9 with huge blocks, or it could be 16:9 with small blocks. It's irrelevant. The idea is we're just saying it's 16 across, 9 up, 4 across, and 3 up. All right? And so you see here that the 16:9 is widescreen, it's a little bit wider, and the 4:3 is a little bit more of a square. Not quite a square, because a square would be 3:3 or 4:4, but it's a little bit wider than a square, but not as wide as 16:9. This widescreen is a little bit wider. So that's what I'm talking about when I say 16:9 and 4:3. So another way we can display 16:9 is if you look at 16/9, if you look at it as far as a fraction, 16/9. If you display that fraction in a decimal form, it's 1.78. Does everybody understand that? 16/9 is 1.78. So it's almost 2, right? So it's 1.78. So if it was 2, it would be 18/9. 18/9 would be 2, but in this case it's 16/9, right? Everybody understand that? Same thing with 4:3. 4 divided by 3 is 1.33. So these are just different ways we can name, or we can identify what 16:9 actually is, or what 4:3 is in a decimal form instead of a fractional form. All right? So if you look at 1.78 by 1, that's the exact same as 16:9. So these two numbers are exactly the same. 1.78 by 1 and 16:9 are the exact same. So it's essentially just math, taking two ratios, but it's basically identifying the exact same. Same thing by 4:3. 1.33 by 1 is the exact same as 4:3. Now this part is a little bit tricky, so if you're not exactly with me at this part, don't feel bad. This is a little bit complicated, but as long as you understand the image, that's what's important. Now we're going to be talking about a little bit about resolutions. So we're talking in basic terms, talking about resolutions, right? So so far we've just talked about aspect ratios. We've talked about 4:3 and 16:9, but now we're going to talk a little bit about resolutions. Okay. So this is an image that shows basic resolutions. Resolutions that we're going to be using in this studio, resolutions that you're going to be using in life. These are basic resolutions for video. So if we start at the smallest block here, I'm going to use the mouse and I'm going to circle exactly what I'm talking about here. This is the smallest resolution that we're going to be talking about today, and it's the smallest resolution that you will be submitting to us. And it is 720 across pixels by 480 down. So it's 720 this way and 480 this way, and it's a 4:3 image. And this is regular standard definition video that you are going to be submitting to us, and this is what we submit to Comcast. Next up, we've got 720 across, or 720, I'm sorry, vertically, and then 1280 across. So these are, again, pixels, video pixels, digital pixels, where we have a 720 image. And this is an HD image. but it's not quite as full HD as the next one, which is going to be the 1920 by 1080. And this is full HD. So if you have a television at home, this is what the native resolution of your television is. And this is what when they refer to HD, usually what they're referring to is the 1920 by 1080, which is the blue box that we're seeing right here, 1920 by 1080. So with that in mind, these three resolutions in mind, and again, the one that I didn't mention is the yellow, and that basically encompasses this full thing, and that's essentially what they use in Europe, but we're not going to talk about that. That's what they call PAL, but we're not going to talk about that today. So if I go further and I bring in what we just learned into this information, this image is a 4:3. This blue box is a 4:3 aspect ratio, and again 1.33. And this 720 image resolution is a 16:9 aspect ratio, 1.78. And then the 1080 is a 16:9 also. So we've got two 16:9 aspect ratios, and then one 4:3 aspect ratio. So we're relating what we learned about aspect ratios to now what we learned with resolution, right? So we basically combine the two. So they are two different things. There's the aspect ratio and then the resolution. Two completely different things, but they do relate. They do have things that are relating in this case. In this case, anything that is an HD is going to be 16:9. Anything that's standard def or SD is going to be 4:3. Moving on. Now, this is going to be where we get into some more advanced resolutions. And so you might have heard people talking, especially with the Olympics that is being broadcast now. People are shooting in higher resolutions than HD, right? So people are shooting in what's called 4K. People are shooting what's called 8K. And so this is essentially a bigger resolution, or a more pixels in the resolution than HD. And so I'm going to just illustrate just how big these resolutions are, so we can kind of wrap our head around it. So up until this point, we've only been talking about what's going on in the red box. The red box down here is HD, right? That's 1920 by 1080. That's what we shoot here in the studio. That's what I'm being shot on right now for this demonstration. Now the the light blue box here is 4K. This is 4K right here, and that's basically double the resolution of, or I'm sorry, 4 times the resolution of the HD, the 1080 resolution that we are shooting here. Then we go up to here and we have 8K. So basically we're getting bigger and bigger by exponential numbers. So it's not just kind of adding a little bit at a time, it's adding huge amounts to video. So this is just to give you an idea. When somebody says 4K and somebody says 8K, this is what they're talking about. But again, all of these resolutions are still 16:9, still the standard widescreen aspect ratio. All right, everybody follow along so far? All right, so the first aspect ratio that was created was this guy named William Kennedy Dixon. He worked for Thomas Edison's lab as a staff photographer. And after Eastman Kodak began mass producing flexible film in the early 1890s, Thomas Edison wanted to put his new film to use in a device called the kinetoscope, the precursor to the projected film. After a few years of start and stop experimentation, they finally arrived at the working prototype. The first film, 35mm film, that Dixon settled on, he created an image on this film that was 4 perforations high, resulting in an image that was 0.95 inch by 0.735 inch, a 4:3 aspect ratio. So if you look at this image here, the first film that somebody created an image on, it was basically the 4:3 aspect ratio was created because of the size of the image. So the actual film was 35mm, and just by sheer luck of creating this image on this film, we created an image that was 4:3. It had nothing to do with sheer luck of just, okay, well, let's see if we can create an image on here. All right, now we got an image. How big is it? Oh, it's this big. So now, because this person back in 1890 created this image on film, now we got stuck with it for all these years. So it's crazy how somebody back then has now me teaching a class on this stuff, when in reality, it was just some guy in a lab creating film, which is kind of crazy to think about. But this is one dude just created this film, and now this is our standard 4:3 video. So for a long, long period of time, everybody used 4:3, and then somehow somebody said, you know what? we want 16 by 9, but why did they create 16 by 9? So I'm gonna basically go over the history of 16 by 9 in a second. So for a long period of time, people produced film, and they shot film, and then they projected film in a theater. And so once that happened, it became super popular. Filmmaking became pretty huge. Then in the 1950s, the television became pretty popular. Television became huge, right? Television became pretty big in homes. People got televisions in their home, and it kind of changed movie theaters, right? Because then, after people got TVs, why would you go to a movie theater? You wouldn't go to a movie theater if you have a TV, because you already have that same experience in your home. There's no reason to go to a movie theater. So what happened was less and less people were going to movie theaters, and the people in the movie industry thought, how do we get people to come back to the movies? How do we get people to come to the theater? And I think that we still kind of have this balance in the world today where people think, oh, should I go to the movies? No, I'll watch it at home. It's better at home. I can go to the bathroom anytime I want. I can go get a snack. It's a better experience watching something at home than the movie theater. So movie theaters are constantly looking for ways to bring people to the theater. And now we've got 3D. Now the people have got the big IMAX TV and movie screens. They're constantly trying to create an experience that you don't have at home. And this was the case even more so in the 1950s. So film studios needed something they could provide that people couldn't get in their homes. So they created widescreen film. And so this was a technology that they called Cinerama. So Cinerama was this crazy cinema experience where they had 3 projectors projected on a screen that was curved, and now they're coming out with these curved TVs, but in reality they created this back in the 1950s, this curved screen that was a widescreen format. And you can see that this widescreen is probably even a little bit more a widescreen than the 16 by 9. It's probably closer to maybe 22 by 9 or 23 by 9. It's a wider screen format than 16 by 9. But you could see why they created this widescreen format. Okay, so after the original Cinerama, they created VistaVision, which was 1.66 by 1, Super Scope, which was 2.35 by 1, Technorama, which is 2.25 by 1, Cinemiracle, that was 2.59 by 1. So all these different resolutions that were being created in the 1950s, 1960s, and nobody really could settle on one standard, because filmmakers were like, well, I'm going to shoot my film on this standard, or I'm going to shoot my film on this. And so nobody really thought, well, let's just create one aspect ratio that'll work with everybody, because filmmakers were experimenting. They were, they had these big egos. They were like, oh, I'm going to shoot my film on this, whatever. So what happened was the TV industry and the film industry got together and they thought, what, we need to create a standard that everybody's going to be using. So they basically took a compromise. They compromised between all these different aspect ratios that were created, and they settled on 16 by 9, or in other words, from what we learned from the slide 1, which is 1.78 by 1. So they settled on this format, and they said, you know what, we'll just use this format because it is going to be a good compromise between all the different formats that we've been creating. So they created 16 by 9 because it was an extreme compromise between the 4 by 3 and the 2.35 by 1 aspect ratio. And they thought, if we create a TV that is 16 by 9, then it will allow us to broadcast different aspect ratios without too much black, right? Because if you broadcast a 4 by 3 image on this screen that's 16 by 9, it's just going to have black bars here and here. If you broadcast a CinemaScope, which is 2.35, it's just going to have black bars on the bottom and top. So they compromised and they said, all right, well, let's do 16 by 9. It's a good mix between the full kind of screen, or the square screens, and the widescreen formats. Okay, so now we're going to talk a little bit about the Pillarbox and Letterbox, and that goes exactly with what I was talking just a second ago. So Pillarbox. So when we talk about a 4 by 3 screen, we look at that. And so we've already talked about what 4 by 3 is. And when you broadcast a 4 by 3 image on a 16 by 9 screen, because that's what everybody has these days, right? If you go into anybody's home in America or in the world, their TV is probably going to be 16 by 9. Some people obviously have older TVs, but for the most part, everybody has got a 16 by 9 television. So as producers, as TV producers, we need to be thinking about that, because that's who's going to be watching our videos. So if we produce a 16 by 9 image and you watch it on a 4 by 3 screen, you're going to have what's called a letterbox. So the letterbox is the black bars on the top and bottom. So Pillarbox is black bars on the left and right. Letterbox is black bars on the top and bottom. The main focus of this is that we want to avoid Pillarbox. We don't want to have the black bars on the left and right. So pillar boxes are when we have the pillars on the left and right. So we want to avoid that. So this is a 4 by 3 image on the left, standard 4 by 3 video on the left, far left 4 by 3 original video. In the center image, we have a 4 by 3 video that has pillar box effect added to it to correctly view on a 16 by 9 monitor, right? And so if you take that video and you put it on a 4 by 3 video again, then you're going to get black bars on top, bottom, and left and right. So if you submit to us a video like this, when we broadcast it on a 4 by 3 screen, it's going to have black bars around the whole thing. So we don't want you to submit a video that looks like this to us. We don't want videos that have the black bars on left and right, because when we put it on a 4 by 3 screen, it's going to have black bars everywhere. Okay, so we also want to avoid letterbox. So again, letterbox is 16 by 9, and the letterbox is the black bars on top and bottom, left to right. So if you take this 16 by 9 image and you render it with letterbox, if you display this on a 16 by 9 TV set, it's going to look like this. So we don't want to render a video with black bars on top and bottom, because then when we display it on a 16 by 9 TV set, it's going to look like this. So we don't want to render it with black bars at all. So this goes back to the question we had earlier, is what format are we sending to Comcast? So Comcast is taking video from us. It's analog video. It's 4 by 3. It's 720 by 480 interlaced NTSC, which is a standard TV format in the United States. And it's 29.97 frames per second. So this is standard. This is what we have no control over. This is what Comcast is taking from us. Now, this might change in the future if Comcast decides that they want to start taking an HD signal from us, which would be ideal. But for the time being, this is what Comcast is taking from us in the studio. So if we want to deliver the best video possible, we need to understand this is what Comcast is taking from us. What are we shooting in this PEG studio? So what are we shooting in this room? What are we shooting, in fact, right now, this seminar? So we're shooting digital video, 16 by 9, and we're shooting a 1920 by 1080 interlaced NTSC, 29.97. So we saw what the difference between a 1920 by 1080 and a 4 by 3 image. It was pretty drastic. So how do we want to format our video for delivery? So how do we want to format our video to be broadcast and delivered to us? So we've got image number 1, which is what Comcast is taking. Image number 2 is what we're creating. If we submit the image that we're creating to Comcast, it's going to look like this. So this is what we are shooting here. This is what Comcast is taking from us. This is going to be what it's going to look like when we give it to Comcast, ideally, right? Ideally, it's going to have these black bars on the top and bottom, and that's something we have no control over, unfortunately. But this is the best case scenario for taking 16 by 9 video and displaying it on a 4 by 3 TV set. So to make it look as best as we possibly can, you must submit in either a 1 or a 2. Now, so when we send 16 by 9 video to Comcast, it will look like number 3, which I already mentioned. And this is out of control. I already mentioned that. Okay, so what do we want to avoid? So this is a screenshot from Sony Vegas, which again I mentioned before. Sony Vegas is the software that we use here in the studio. So this is going to be what I'm going to be using for all the examples in this class. So this is an image of a 16 by 9 video that's got black bars on the bottom, black bars on top. We want to avoid having this, having any black bars on our, because this is our project preview screen, and we want to avoid these black bars at all costs. So we want to avoid this image. And I'm going to talk about how we avoid that in a second. Next, we've got a 4 by 3 image that has pillar box. So again, the image is a 16 by 9 video, but the video is shot 4 by 3, right? So the video is shot with 4 by 3, but the project is 16 by 9. So we have a mismatch of project settings and aspect ratio settings. We don't want any mismatch. All right, next we've got a 4 by 3 image that was shot 16 by 9. So you see how this is squished like this? This is another problem that people have when they submit video, is their video is squished left and right. And again, it's also sometimes squished up and down. But in this case, this was shot 16 by 9, so it was shot a widescreen format, but we're squishing it to fit into 4 by 3. We want to avoid this also. And so this is something we're going to have to eyeball, or you're going to have to know exactly how you shot it. So you have to kind of look at the image and say, you know what, that doesn't look right to me. She doesn't look natural. She looks like she's kind of squished. You need to use your eye for this one. You can't just rely on the technical aspects. You need to think about, okay, wait, that doesn't look right. I need to fix that. Okay, again, 4 by 3 video that was shot 16 by 9, so we want to avoid that. Next is the 16 by 9 video that was shot 4 by 3. So in this case, we've got the video that's stretched wide, and it is shot, obviously, it should be shot, it's shot 4 by 3, but we've stretched it to fit the whole widescreen video screen. We want to avoid that also. Okay, so how do we avoid these things, right? Two things that have to be the same, two things that need to be set to the exact same thing. Number one is the aspect ratio of the properties, project properties, and number two is the aspect ratio of the video track. So this is universal. This is not just Sony Vegas. This is with every software package that you're going to be using. We need to make sure that the project settings are the same as the video track settings. How to change the video project settings. So in Vegas, since this is what we're going to be talking about, we want to go to File up at the top, and we want to go to Properties. So you see where File is at the very, very top, and you see where Properties are at the very bottom. So we're going to click on File, then Properties. Okay, so Project Properties, this is a window that's going to pop up in Vegas, and you want to click on the drop-down menu for the template. So at the top where it says Template, there's going to be a drop-down window that we're going to click on that, and it's going to drop down as we see here. We want to choose, and let me just, because this is probably going to be difficult to follow. I'm going to go in Vegas, and we'll just follow along with this. All right, so right now I've got a project that is 4 by 3, right? So let's say I wanted to change this project to be 16 by 9, because that's what my video looks like. So I'm going to go up here to File. This is what I just went over, File, Properties. Can everybody see that? Click on Properties. This window is going to pop up, and over here where it says Template, there's going to be a drop-down menu. Now these are going to be all the templates that were created in Vegas. These were all included in Sony Vegas, and they're probably included in every other software package that you guys would be using. So well, the one thing that we need to be worried about, the only thing that we need to be worried about is aspect ratio, right? So we already learned what aspect ratios we're dealing with, either 4 by 3 or 16 by 9. So if you see something that says widescreen, what aspect ratio is that going to be? 16 by 9, correct. If you see something that does not say widescreen or is not HD, it's going to be 4 by 3. It's going to be the regular aspect ratio. So in this case, we have a bunch of different templates up here. These are probably all going to be 4 by 3 because they're all a standard definition aspect ratio. All of these down here that say HD, these are all going to be 16 by 9 because HD is by default 16 by 9. There's no such thing as a 4 by 3 HD. Anything that's HD is going to be 16 by 9. So we see something that says widescreen, that's going to be widescreen. If there's something that says HD, that's going to be widescreen. So most of these are going to be a widescreen format because that's the future. That's where we're all going. So I'm going to choose a widescreen format. In this case, I'm just going to choose the NTSC DV widescreen. So this is going to be the same resolution. Resolution is irrelevant, right? Because we already talked about how resolution is not what we're talking about. So you see DV, NTSC, or NTSC DV and NTSC DV widescreen. They have the exact same resolution, right? So these two options have the exact same resolution. Resolution is irrelevant. What I'm talking about is aspect ratio. So I'm going to choose widescreen, and I'm going to click OK. And you see the big difference is that we no longer have the black bars on the top and bottom. The black bars are gone. Instead, we have just the video. Just the video, and that's what's in our project. And that's the most important part. So when we are editing our video, we don't want to see black bars at the top and bottom. We don't want to see black bars on the left and right. So I'm going to go to another type of video and do the exact same thing again. And this is for a 4 by 3 video. And you see how we have the black bars on the top and bottom. So you see now that we've changed the project settings to be 16 by 9, now this video is got black bars. So I'm going to go back up to File, go to Properties, and under Template, I'm going to find a aspect ratio or a template that has the proper aspect ratio. So I don't want to choose any of these HD because that's going to be 16 by 9. So I'm going to choose one of these 4:3, and you can even see that some of these are listed with the aspect ratio in them. Some of these at the top, 4:3, 4:3, 69, 69. So we're going to 4:3, click OK, and now we're back to 4:3 with no black bars on top and bottom. So the moral of this story is we want to choose a project aspect ratio that is going to match the aspect ratio of the video that we shot, right? Everybody understand that concept? Yeah. So we always want to make sure that the aspect ratio of the video we shot is the same exact aspect ratio of our project. All right, so choose a template that matches your video, i.e. 4:3 or 16:9. If the template uses the word widescreen, it is 16:9. If the resolution is HD, 1080 by 1080i or 720, it will be 16:9. So again, resolution is not what I'm talking about. Resolution is irrelevant. Aspect ratio is the name of the game. That's what it's all about. The only 4:3 template that you should ever use is the NTSC DV 720 by 480 27.97. There it is right there. Okay, how to change your clip's aspect ratio. So we talked about how to change the project settings, right? Now we're going to talk about how to change your clip's aspect ratio, because we need to match them, right? We need to match the project aspect ratio with the clip aspect ratio. So we changed the project. That was the file, properties, change the template. Now we're going to talk about how to change the clip aspect ratio. So in the timeline, in any timeline, that in this case Vegas, but in any timeline that you're going to be working with, you're going to have settings for your timeline, and there's going to be a setting for aspect ratio. I'm going to go over how you do it for Vegas. So you're going to right-click anywhere on your clip, and I'll bring Vegas back up in a second, and I'm going to show you guys how to do this. But click on anywhere in your clip, right-click, hover over where it says switches, and you see here it says switches. Hover over that with your mouse. You don't have to click, you just got to hover over it. And then you want to uncheck where it says maintain aspect ratio. So right here, as you see that it's checked, we want to uncheck this, right? Now, unchecking it is going to do something really magical. If the maintain aspect ratio is already unchecked, leave it alone. So we want to make sure that it is unchecked. So right now it's checked in this example. We want to uncheck it. When we uncheck maintain aspect ratio, it's going to do something magical to our clip. It's going to release all assigned aspect ratios to your clip. So it's going to default back to our project aspect ratio, and that's what we want. We want them to be identical. So we don't want to assign any aspect ratio to the clip. We want it to default back to whatever our project is. So by unchecking this box, it will essentially remove all assigned aspect ratio from your clip. It will take on whatever aspect ratio is assigned to your project, which was what we want, thus allowing us to match the aspect ratio of the clip to whatever we want based on what we assign the project. So by unchecking maintain aspect ratio, we are ensuring that it will just fall back on whatever aspect ratio we have assigned to the project, thus giving us absolutely no chance of any black bars at the top, black bars at the bottom. What if, and this has happened to a lot of people's videos that have submitted videos for NECAT, what if you have both 4:3 video and 16:9 video in your project, in your episode? A lot of people have, have their intro in 4:3, but when they shoot video, it's 16:9. What do you do in that case? So what I recommend you do, and this is for the best interest of your video, is you always render in 4:3 if you have both 16:9 and 4:3 videos in your project. Because if you have 4:3 video, you're going to have black bars top and bottom, which when you submit to Comcast, you're going to have anyway. And your 4:3 video is going to be full screen, and so you won't have to worry about having the black bars on the left and right when we are broadcasting to Comcast. So if you have video that has both 16:9 and 4:3, always set your project settings to be 4:3. Does that make sense? Okay, now we're talking now about render format. So we had a couple of questions, and most of the questions thus far have been about render format. So now I'm finally going to talk about the proper rendering formats for your show. So if you are going to be rendering for 4:3, this is something that I think Sharice or Shane Therese, you had a question about, is the MPEG-2 versus the MPEG-4, right? So if you're going to be rendering as a 4:3, I recommend you do MPEG-2 720 by 480, interlaced 29.97, and PCM 48 kilohertz audio. So this is if you're going to be submitting a 4:3 video. But for the majority of you, the people who are actually shooting your videos in 16:9, which should be, for the most part, all of you, I recommend you submit in a 16:9 format, H.264 video codec, which is going to be either a MP4 or an MOV, and it's going to be 1920 by 1080, interlaced video at 29.97 frames per second, and AAC LC 48 kilohertz audio. So the last part is going to be the audio part. The things that I just went over still ring true, still are absolutely true as far as maintaining the aspect ratio of your video that you shot in. So whatever you shot in, whatever the native format that you shot your video in, you need to render your video in that format. So if you shot here in the studio, you shot in 60:9, so that means you need to render in 60:9. If you shot somewhere else with a standard definition camera, then you need to render in 4:3 since your aspect ratio is going to be 4:3. So this sheet of paper that is basically taken right from the manufacturer's website of our equipment that we use to broadcast, these are going to be the appropriate rendering formats for you. Now, if you render in Sony Vegas, there are some pre-created video formats that Eric created for everybody to render with. So when you go to render as, I'm going to just show you all these because it's probably going to look like this. Under where it says Sony, AVC, MVC, there are going to be some MP4 formats that you need to use in order to render to the proper format. They're going to be labeled 1920 by 1080 full HD and 720 by 480 SD. These are going to be the formats that you need to render as. And so if you just want to get the ones that are starred, which is I think the way Eric has it formatted, just click on the checkbox that says Show Favorites Only, and you'll see the two templates that you should be recording to, or should be rendering to. So 1920 by 1080 full HD, that MP4, and 720 by 480 SD, which is also an MP4 format. So these are the only two formats that you need to render to if you are rendering in Sony Vegas. Every software package is going to have a separate separate settings, separate way to get to the settings, and separate templates for use. But for Sony Vegas, if you are using Sony Vegas at home, come see me, and I will give you these files that you can load on your computer. Or if you are editing here, these are already preloaded on all the computers that we have here in the studio. So anyway, so the main focus that I want everybody to take out of this class is we want to avoid at all costs the pillar bars and the letterbox bars, right? We want to avoid all black bars top bottom, all black bars left and right. And the way we do that is we understand the difference between a 4:3 image and a 16:9 image. And so what we want to make sure that we're doing is identifying what image we start off with. If we start off with a 4:3 image, we need to be aware of that. If we start off with a 16:9 image, we need to be aware of that. And we need to render accordingly. Okay. Well, thank you guys very much for coming to this seminar. I appreciate it very much. And hopefully, everybody who is watching this here and also watching at home will not submit your episodes in letterbox or pillarbox format, and we'll all be better for it. We'll all have better videos on our channel on NECAT. Thank you guys very much. Appreciate it.